Hello, today we have an amazing guest, Jessie McGrath. She's a veteran, a prosecutor with 27 years of experience, a lawyer licensed in Supreme Court, a producer of the Emmy-nominated series. Welcome, Jessie.
Good morning and hi, how are you doing?
Great, how are you?
Tired.
Thank you for your time and thank you for coming.
Oh, no problem whatsoever. It's getting our voices out there and talking about the issues that we're facing is so incredibly important.
Jessie, before we dive deep into politics and legislation, let's start with your personal story.
Sure.
Could you share a bit about your transition journey and how your life looks now?
So I started my transition almost 10 years ago exactly. This is the month 10 years ago that I started hormones. And so it's been an incredible journey over the last 10 years. It's been so much that I have learned about myself and about others. And just having an entirely different perspective on the world and my life and how I fit into it. But I was 53 years old when I finally made the determination to transition. And that was, a very, very difficult thing to finally come to realize. But it's also something I knew from a very, very early age. I knew when I was a kid that I was different. I knew that I was a girl. I would pray at night that, when I woke up, I would be anatomically correct and I could just fit in the way I knew that I could. But when puberty hit, depression set in, angst, anxiety, not feeling connected with who I was supposed to be. And so it was, a very difficult time for me. And I look at it as kind of the beginning of the poisoning of my life by testosterone, and the negative things that came along with all of that. But I desperately tried to continue to fit in and do what I needed to do. There was a time I was getting some therapy when I was in college, and I really wanted to let this secret out to my therapist. And I couldn't say it directly, so I kind of told a little bit of a story about some things. And then my therapist goes, "Oh, and that's when you were molested." And I was like, "No, I've never been molested, but it must be something else. Let's just, and that was the closest I ever got to letting anybody else know about who I was because I felt incredibly different. I thought that it was wrong. Um, I grew up fairly religiously, going to church every Sunday for a long, long time. In fact, probably pretty much up until the time of my transition, I was still continuing to go to church, and it was very, very difficult to balance or to relate the religious teachings that I had been told were the truth with what was really the truth of my reality, and they didn't match up. And so I tried extremely hard to get the me to be okay with the that, until it got to the point where I could not do that anymore. The constant feeling of not being me, the constant living up to society's expectations, it just got to be too much. And for a long time, I thought I was being really good about keeping that side of my of me hidden away and tamped down and you know not being a part of my psyche. But what I didn't realize is that never goes away. It stays within your mind, and it's there on a subconscious level, always poking at you, always wanting to get out, always being there. And the fight to keep your true identity hidden is one of the most difficult things that I think people go through in life. And there are so many people who are living their lives today refusing to recognize and accept the truth of who they are. And I think that's part of the reason why we have such incredible backlash against us in the community, because here we are living our true selves, living our reality. And so many people want to do that, but they can't. And so they come down on us as being something wrong. So, 10 years ago, I started estrogen. Within a couple of months, I had changed my name and gender legally. A few months after that, I had some minimal FFS, facial feminization surgery, and a breast augmentation. And then a year after I had done that, I had my what what I call is GCS, and a lot of people call it gender confirmation surgery. I prefer to call it genital correction surgery because they corrected my genitals to match who I always was. And it definitely it wasn't confirming who I was because I already knew who I was. But it was just correcting that birth defect that for whatever reason in my development, how things did not line up. And now everything kind of lines up, and living as my true self has been one of the most amazing things that I've ever been through. And seeing the amount of people that I now connect with on such a real level, it is such a diametric switch from what my life was previously. So for me, it's just been absolutely amazing, fantastic, something that I could never, never go back to being who I was, because that was not me. That was somebody who I had to pretend to be to get along, to get me into the point of life where I could finally be me. And there is nothing that anybody could say or do that will change that. I am who I am 24/7, 365 days a year. I'm Jesse, I'm a badass, and I am not going to change.
Yes, you said you grew up in a religious family in rural area. What was the impact of growing on farmland and the faith on your understanding of yourself?
Well, growing up on a farm, you have to be self-reliant in a lot of respects. You have to, depend on yourself and your little community that you have, because when you're, for example, when I was in high school and I was living on the farm in rural Nebraska, it wasn't as if there was, a number of stores just down the street where you could go get what you need to do. Sometimes, it was a 150-mile round trip to get a part that you needed. And so it was having to rely on yourself, and that I think was one of the things that was the greatest gift from doing that is learning how to be self-reliant, learning how to do a lot of different things. When you live on a farm, you become a plumber, a welder, a maintenance personnel. You learn to do plumbing, you learn to do electrical wiring, because a lot of times you don't have the ability to just call somebody up 5 minutes away and they're there to help you. You learn how to do what you have to do. And I used that when I started doing the research into why I was continuing to have these these feelings, why I continued to feel more comfortable when I was presenting female. And, that led me to do a whole ton of research in both medical, legal, and all different kinds of areas, finding trans people who had transitioned, learning their stories, and it allowed me to, take charge of my life and then start directing where I needed to go. I learned about how to do name changes. I learned what HRT was. I learned who the good medical doctors in the area, in the profession were, who to avoid. It was all of these tools that I learned growing up. It just melded in really, really good to discovering what I needed to do to help me finally become comfortable with myself. And a lot of it in on the religious side was finally realizing that there is no prohibition about being trans within the Bible. It all comes from people's interpretations of that has taken place over thousands of years, and different people's political agendas have changed some of the verses and the meaning. I don't believe that homosexuality was ever really mentioned in the Bible. I think it was 1943 with the revisions here in America with, fundamentalists that actually put those words in there. Otherwise, it was there is no direct discussions in relationship to that. There is no prohibition against being trans. There's no definitive saying that it's okay either. It's just not something that's truly mentioned and discussed within there. And finally, finding some people and listening to their interpretations of what the Bible truly says, and the fact that it depends on whether you want to focus on the Old Testament or the New Testament. A lot of people who claim to be following the New Testament, but yet bring in dogma and other things from the Old Testament, which, based on my understanding, was kind of wiped out to a certain extent with the New Covenant, and all you needed to do to please God at this point was accept Jesus as your Savior. There's a lot of folks who seem to think that it's more than that, and I'm at a loss. I thought it was, live your life good, treat others as you want them to treat you, respect your neighbors, and accept God and share your love with folks was the main message, and what we were looking to do. And when I finally was able to see that and realize that God created me this way, I was created in God's image, and God is neither male nor female. God is a spirit, and so my physical being in this earth, I'm a vessel to to share God's word. I'm a vessel who was created by God in a different way than maybe some other people were, but that doesn't devalue me as a human, nor does it, because I chose the path to transition and be able to better cope with life. That makes me a better person. That makes me a better Christian. It makes me somebody who's willing to be able to talk with folks and be able to come out and be able to speak freely and be able to share the joy. When I think back on certain aspects of my life and certain times when God obviously intervened to do things for me, it was when I finally looked at all of that and that light bulb went off, and it was, okay. Um, you know, uh, People love to use, Bible verses and say things like, um, God knew you in the womb. He created you before you, and it's like, well, if that's the case, God knew he was creating a trans woman when he created me, because obviously I am trans. This is not some delusion, magic thing. It's like, this is how I live my life all the time. And it's an absolutely incredible, beautiful life. I help more people than I could ever think that I was be able to do. And so finally coming to the realization that God was okay with my being trans, because obviously this is something that God does over and over and over all around the world. There are millions of trans people in this world, and so that shows that this is not just something that's, made up in some way. There is a real basis for people having gender dysphoria. There's a real basis. What it is, I wish I knew. There's a lot of different theories. I'm personally a proponent of the fact that the body and the brain develop at different times during the course of gestation, and depending on factors that take place, it may affect that development. And there are real differences in individuals' brains between male and female. There are certain specific areas that you can basically tell if it's male or female based on looking at the size of certain cells under a microscope. And research has been done which shows that trans people's brains in that area match their gender identity and not their birth sex. So clearly something happens somewhere that causes this to occur. And finally seeing all of that and just coming to the realization, well, God does work in mysterious ways, and I'm one of God's mysteries apparently to a lot of folks, but it's really not all that mysterious when you look at it and you get down to it. So the the mix of the religion and all of that are just, you know, a part of who I was growing up to allow me to become who I am today.
So you've said you started transitioning at the age of 53. What are the pros and cons of transitioning later in life?
Oh God, this is such a discussion and such an area that is so incredibly varied for people. And the one thing I've always done is I've never, sat here and go, what if I had done this? If I had transitioned when I was young, how would my life be different? And it's like, for me, that's a lot of wasted energy because I didn't. I did it when I did and how I did. And I'm, there's so many parts of me that are glad that I waited until I was later in life to be able to do that. And then there are parts that go, oh God, look at what you had to go through to get to where you're at, and a lot of that could have been avoided if you had been allowed to transition earlier. Um, when I came out to my kids, and one of the things that is in my mind very beneficial about transitioning later in life is that it allowed me to have a somewhat normal period of things where I ended up getting married and we had kids. I have 5 kids, and when I came out to my kids, I had the discussion that they were incredibly lucky. And they kind of, looked at me, and I said, you're incredibly lucky, because if the technology that exists today had existed when I was your age, if the acceptance that exists today had existed when I was your age, if the the knowledge that we had and the medical advancements that we now have today had existed when I was your age, we wouldn't be having this discussion because you wouldn't exist. Because I know that if I had been given this opportunity, I would have jumped on it. I would have loved nothing more than not playing football and being a cheerleader, playing volleyball, doing things that I really kind of wanted to do but couldn't. I mean, I took home economics in high school, and was the only guy in the school that was doing that. And then I got a visit from the principal who was like, um, the physics professor is really upset that you didn't take physics. And so, you need to get in that. And so I negotiated two study halls in exchange for changing home economics to physics. But it was, that's what I all wanted to do. So if I could have done that, I mean, I think about how my life would have been different. I would have definitely been in for a fight because I grew up in the 60s and the 70s. I graduated from high school in 1979. So that was, all during the fight for women's rights, the right for abortion. I saw all of that. My mom was very much a feminist, even though she was a Republican. She fought hard to break, glass ceilings and do things like that. So transitioning earlier in life, you don't get the physical characteristic changes that happen when going through testosterone poisoning. You would not get things that have to be surgically corrected later on. The if some people develop big Adam's apples, mine really wasn't all that big, and I did not develop really strong male characteristics. I did not have to go through full body laser hair removal type things because I didn't have it. I did not masculinize really, really good, I guess. I could never bulk up lifting weights. I could never do the things that, you would think guys can do. I was forced to play football when I was in high school because it was a really small school and I was one of the biggest kids. So it was just expected of me, but we would lift weights and I could see guys bulking up and I was still this, skinny, gangly, I never could develop that. And so to me, the biggest advantage probably was I was able to build a professional career, and I was able to, the biggest blessing, of course, is my kids. They are the joy of my life. They are what kept me alive, basically, because there were a number of times I seriously contemplated suicide because of my depression and my angst and my um, feelings of not being needed, not fitting in, not, and so I would get to those points, and there were a couple of times when I was there with a gun in my hand, just going, please, God, give me the strength to pull the trigger, and it will all be over. And then I would think about my kids and if my kids were to find me, and what type of trauma that would put them through. So having had kids and having um, the responsibility for them, having, it was no longer my life because I was responsible for these other lives. And so I guess an advantage was is I was so busy that I couldn't let the dysphoria take over me, because when you have, and my ex and I had 4 kids in 6 years. So it was very busy. Uh, and the blessing of that is that I didn't have time to worry about my gender dysphoria issues. And so it really didn't come up a lot on a conscious level. Again, that subconscious was always there pushing. And there were a few occasions, and not a lot, where if nobody was around, I would like put on eyeshadow and do some eyeliner using my ex's cosmetics. I rarely, I would wear a dress or something. And it was for a very short period of time, and then it would get put back away. And so for me, the late in life transitioning was good in that it allowed me to have my kids, it allowed me to develop my job, it allowed me to, you know, be able to have a profession, an income. And when it came time to transition, because I knew I had a pension from work, I knew if things got really, really bad, that I would be able to retire, and I could, move somewhere with a lower cost of living, but I would still be able to get by. I knew that I had that little bit of a safety net, so that if things did get back bad at work, at least I knew I would be able to get a trailer in the Midwest somewhere, and I wouldn't freeze to death, and I would probably be able to eat. And so that gave me, a certain amount of courage to be able to, pull the trigger and say, it's time to transition. But then I look at kids who get gender affirming care and go through, the blockers so they don't develop the characteristics they don't want, and then get on cross-sex hormones so they can get those characteristics that they want, and seeing how almost all of them are incredibly happy, vibrant, being able to grow up, socialize the way that they fit in with their peers. So I wish we could get definitive answers on some of this, because it's so hard to argue when you have not a definitive diagnosis test that you can do. If it were able to, do a blood test and they could say, hey, yep, you're trans, it would end so much of this bigotry and negativity that people have in relationship to the gender dysphoria and the gender confirming care. It just is so incredibly hard to convince someone who says, well, there's no scientific proof. And it's like, well, 10 million trans people running around, isn't that proof? The fact that the success of gender affirming care for so many people. Yes, there are detransitioners. Yes, there are people who deceased. Oh God, I'm having just a wonderful time with the words this morning. But there are people who desist from thinking that they're trans, and frankly, some of them are folks that would probably have figured it out fairly early in the process from talking to so many people who have undergone HRT, and the fact that once they begin it, so many people feel incredibly better and different because their body is running on the hormone that their mind thinks it should be on. And so getting that together. And if a person gets on HRT and they don't like it and they don't like the effects and they're fighting, that's kind of a good sign that, hey, maybe you are not trans on this. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that a lot of the HRT for a person transitioning from male to female is very similar to the treatment for prostate cancer. You get a lot of the same drugs, and universally, dudes who are undergoing that medical procedure hate it. They don't like the what it's doing to them, how it makes them feel. Whereas a trans woman, you start that and it's like, oh my God, the sky is blue. Flowers smell so amazing. Listen to the birds chirp. Oh yeah. So that's kind of at least that's one of the things that I've known and in talking with professionals over the years and talking just with so many trans people from not only the US, but around the world that I've been able to connect with over the last 10 years. Listening to those similar stories about how they have such a HRT has such a positive effect on them that it's I'm surprised that we have as many people who detransition as we even do, because you would think early on in the process they would realize that. What I think a lot of folks don't realize is a lot of folks who detransition and get out of it, there's a very number of reasons. Frequently, it's pressures from family and society that causes them to do that. And in fact, many people who do detransition go on to later retransition again because that's what it is meant for them. And I wish there was a way that we could limit the potential number of people who detransition. But you don't do it by denying care to everybody. Just because some people have a bad experience in relationship to it doesn't mean you get rid of it for everybody. You just try to find a way so that it's limited in some respect. So, the benefits of transitioning early obviously are your body develops in a way that you want it to and that you expect it to and is in keeping with your gender. That is, to me, and the fact that you can be socialized as in with your peer group of your sex are two of the most beneficial things that come from an early transition. Though potentially they'll then still end up in the place where you could be discriminated against and you may not be able to have the job prospects that you would uh, being your natal sex because you're not different, but I have spoken to a lot of people who have transitioned later in life, and there are some incredible disadvantages in relationship to that. For me, having kids was fantastic. For a large number of trans people who transition later in life, um, their kids reject them, and that is so incredibly sad. And I don't know if it's just simply because of being trans or if there were other relationship related issues that did not allow them to be potentially as close, where there would be understanding. A lot of times it's goes back to that religious thing again, and you have very religious children who view it as a sin. Um, so that is a potential incredibly bad disadvantage of transitioning later in life. You can also run into those same employment related issues that so many of us face. And it may not be overt discrimination. It just means, you get fired for non-performance, but if it was somebody who was not trans, that non-performance would be no big issue. But because they want to use that as a excuse, yeah, you run into that. So you could end up losing everything. And I have so many trans friends who lost their spouse, lost their kids, lost their job, lost their life savings, lost the house that they've been in, and had to start totally over again. So when you compare the two, which one is better? I personally, the end result is as long as you get to live your life as you, it's successful. But again, uh, having talked with so many people who transition later in life, it's been a real mixed bag for them. Uh, I have a roommate who's trans who had many good jobs in the professional world, had risen to be, become vice president at multiple different companies and in multiple different industries, and was very successful, had multiple houses. And when she came out as trans, ended up getting divorced, losing the houses, losing the jobs, and in fact had gotten to the point where she was basically, living back home with her parents because she had really nowhere else to go. And it's been so beautiful to watch her blossom and bloom over the last 10 years, where she started with just a low level job making minimum wage at an amusement park because that was the only job she could get. Educated, experienced, and no one would hire her because she's trans. And she parlayed that job onto another job, onto the next job, getting promotions along the way, going back to school, getting her master's in psychology and becoming a therapist. And now is one of my cohorts in working for LA County and is a therapist for the county. So um, it's possible to rebound from that, but watching what she had to go through and watching what so many other of my friends I've seen them go through, it is definitely good in the end. But getting to that point, sometimes it can seem like you're pushing a snowball up a sheer cliff wall, and it seems like
It's
you
true.
can you'll never get it, or you'll never make headway, but one step at a time, and you get there. So um I am so jealous though of trans kids.
Jesse, you've transitioned while having a successful career of a prosecutor. How did your colleagues and clients react to your transition?
Oh, yeah, I had been on the job for 27 years at the time that I transitioned, and um, I was fairly well known within the office, and the LA County DA's office is huge. We are the largest local prosecuting agency in the country, pretty much by far. At the time, we had 1,000 DAs working for the office, and I had done a number of Saturday seminars over the years where people go to get continuing legal education. So I had spoken on computer-related crimes because I helped create what is now the cyber crimes division. For a long time, it was me and one other DA doing all of the computer crimes throughout the county. And so I had done presentations on that. I had done presentations on consumer protection. I had done seminars on effective use of PowerPoints, how to use digital evidence. So I was fairly well known, and so it was pretty much a given that I was not going to be stealth in my job. You can't suddenly change, and having worked with 1,000 people and appeared in front of hundreds of judges and defense lawyers and the bar community and so I was very straightforward when I decided to make the decision to transition. Fortunately, there had been another DA that had transitioned a few years before me. And in talking with some of my friends, they were explaining how she had gone about doing it. And one of the things that she had done is gone around and spoke to each of her coworkers in the immediate, area where we were working and had an individualized conversation with them. And so I decided I was going to do that. And so I had some pictures of me as Jesse, and I showed one of my friends. He goes, "Oh, is that your new girlfriend?" And I said, "No, that's me." But by and large, folks that I was working with, folks that I had known for a long time, were really pretty positive in my coming out to them on this issue. I know that one of my coworkers was a little distressed by my discussion and conversation with her, and this is in 2015, so um, it was after the Time magazine Laverne Cox cover, and it was right at the same time as Caitlyn Jenner was starting to come out, and so. One of my coworkers apparently was a little distressed by my announcement, and I believe she was extremely concerned that I would use the ladies' restroom. And so she contacted our HR department. I did get a phone call from the legal rep at HR who um, was pretty good about the conversation and started off by saying, "We're hearing some rumors about some things, and you don't have to talk to us now if you don't want to, but we just wanted to reach out and let you know that we're here for you in the event, and I was like, "Oh, you mean the rumors about me transitioning? Yeah, well, that's not a rumor. That's actually happening. So when would be a good time for us to get together to discuss timelines and things like that?" And so I actually pretty much immediately went to meet with them. At the time, I already had a court date for my name and gender change, which was about a month away. And so I said, "Well, this is a good time to do this because." Um, we were in the process of moving our part of our office from a rented office building that we had been in for a lot of years into the Hall of Justice, which is catty corner from the Los Angeles City Hall, across the street from a federal courthouse, across the street from the what used to be known as the Criminal Courts building, and now it's the Foltz Criminal Justice Center. So we were getting ready to move into that new building, and our move-in date was June 15th. And my court appearance was like May 24th or 23rd, something like that. It was actually just a couple of days before my birthday. And so I was like, well, I guess a good timeline would be, hey, when we go into the new building, everything, because I am going to be legally changed and different, that'll be the date that I start full time with the county. So basically, I left my old building as the old me and went into the new building as Jesse. And it was really a good experience. My name tag was changed, all my business cards. My dead name began with a J, so fortunately I didn't have to change my email address at work. It just was, it seemed almost pretty seamless. And although there were still some issues of, things showing up in computer systems with my old I name and such on it, but um, everybody was actually really pretty supportive. I got an incredible amount of support. Um, at the time, I was co-counsel. Our office and the San Francisco DA's office were involved in a lawsuit against Uber for making misrepresentations about background checks, of charging fees, and making misrepresentations about what those were. I remember getting ready to tell the DAs up there about it, and we had a meeting set. And I was also scheduled to speak at a consumer protection conference statewide for all of the DAs who do consumer protection work. And so I was like, oh, I better call the gal who runs the district attorneys, the statewide district attorneys association meeting on this, and let her know that I'm doing it. So I'm walking to the meeting with the folks in San Francisco because I flew down and took the subway and was then walking to their building. And I called her and I said, hey, just so you know, I'm transitioning and my name in June at the conference is going to be this. And she laughed and she goes, oh, this is the best one I've heard all day. And I was like, the best one. And then I realized it was April 1st. Uh, April Fool's Day. And I was like, oh God. And like, no, 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 this isn't a joke. This is real. I really am doing that. I guess I could have picked a better day to tell you, but so when I went into the meeting with the other DAs from San Francisco, they were all incredibly supportive. In fact, one of them that day sent me a $50 Sephora gift card saying I was going to be needing this a lot, and with having three daughters, yeah, I spend a lot of money at Sephora. And so she got me hooked into that. And then so many welcoming messages from other people within my office. It really was a very good experience for the most part. I did not face a lot of issues. People were generally pretty good. It took a little bit of time for people to get pronouns and things right, and even unfortunately 5 years after the fact, there was some instances with someone in the office who was not getting it and had constantly made some issues, but I want to say 98% has been incredibly positive. It's weird because sometimes you hear things that you would have no idea. Um, I received a message on Twitter from the mom of a trans kid uh, whose father is a judge in LA County. And he's kind of a gruff old guy, apparently. I'm not sure which one it is because she never actually told me, but um, she said that when her child came out, um, her dad, who doesn't really understand this, but apparently who knew me and knew my story, um, would just kind of fall back on that. And he goes, I understand. And because he had heard my story and what I had gone through and what I had done and how much this is so true. And he was just like, yeah, Jesse McGrath, yeah. And so he became accepting on that. So, getting your story out and telling things, and having people that you work with, being able to get it is such, I can't tell you how good it makes me feel that I make a difference in some people's lives by having shared what I have gone through so that they can understand it when they have somebody they love who's going through it. Um, and I was asked to do a Saturday seminar on transition related things. So, about a year into my transition, I stood up on the stage in an auditorium filled with my peers discussing, what I had gone through and what it was kind of about, and did an education for them. And I have nothing but gratitude, for how the county has treated me and allowed me to be able to be who I am. I have been featured on the human resources page for Los Angeles County as one of like 12 faces of LA County, and talking about, how important it is for me to be accepted and be able to live as who I am and work as who I am. I helped out and met with the county HR department for a couple of hours doing videos and related things, and speaking with them, and it was so weird because there's now an educational thing on the county learning system about trans issues, and it's like, holy cow, they took almost everything that I said and put it into and it's kind of cool at the end to see a little thank you for, participating and being an expert and helping him in relationship to that. I'm also currently a part of my office's what we call equity action team. A few years ago, the County of Los Angeles put a spotlight in relationship to looking at diversity, racism, diversity, inclusion. And so we have what we call the ARDI initiative, Anti-Racism, Diversity, Inclusion Initiative. And I've been a part of that, and it's been a wonderful experience meeting with people from all across different parts of the county to discuss these issues and how we're going to change a little bit of the culture of the county so that people do recognize that, there are others that are different than them and that they should not be excluded from the opportunity to advance. And that's clearly what so many people on the right don't understand about Artie. It's not setting goals of numbers of people that have to be in positions. It's not saying you have to have this many of this demographic. It's simply a recognition of there are different groups who do have the qualifications and the ability to perform these jobs, and opening up the ability for them to apply and not simply being discounted because of their status. It's not to create an unfair workplace. It's a place to create a fair workplace where everybody has an equal opportunity to be able to advance. And that has been something that has not historically been available to folks. Now, in my office, frankly, we have a lot of diversity and inclusion. 50%, and for a long, long time, it's been this way. Over half of the managers within the office are female. We have managers who cut across all racial, ethnic backgrounds. So it's been very good and interesting working on that. But it also shows me the commitment that our county has to allowing people to be able to thrive. In fact, when I look back on my transition, it was like I was promoted to a grade 4 DA in 1999. I was never given a promotion to a management position, even though after that period of time, I was running our high tech section and building it up and getting additional resources until we eventually became a division, at which time they had somebody else running it. And I was not credited with being an official manager in the office. So I did not get another promotion until yeah, 2020. So it was 30 years or 20 years or whatever it was before I actually got something. And and I got a promotion after I had transitioned. So I there's a part of me that, by my transitioning, I now stick up for myself much more than I did before. Before I was kind of content to just kind of hang out in the background and do a good job and think, well, somebody will recognize it and I'll get advancement that way. That's was not how it worked. I didn't understand that. And after finally transitioning and then still doing that, management did recognize my potential and they did promote me. And it wasn't because I was trans, but it wasn't used as a basis to deny me that promotion. So my office has generally been great. There have been a few negative issues, but by and large, I have people who tell me they admire me for my courage. They admire me for speaking out. The people who I manage directly, pretty much to a T, everyone has said I am the best manager they have ever worked for. And I think part of it is because I do have empathy. I do have understanding because I am a member of a marginalized community.
That's awesome. Jesse, before the interview, we discussed your involvement in the case in the Supreme Court. Arguments in the Skrmetti case. Can you give some details? I know there are some public figures who were involved, Representative Sarah McBride, Lily Wachowski, Elliot Page.
Yeah. So the case of Skrmetti is one that was brought by the ACLU in Tennessee against the state of Tennessee for their placing restrictions on trans youth health care. And this is something that has happened all over the country. There are many different states that have gone ahead and placed restrictions on trans healthcare, on trans sports participation. They're now going through and attacking ability to change records. The state of Texas their attorney general has directed state agencies to go back and revert individuals' birth certificates and driver's licenses. So this is something that has been happening and going on all around the country. I was approached by what was at the time the Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund um, um, on a case. I believe the first one I got involved with was a case out of Arkansas that that was going up. The state was appealing a temporary restraining order blocking them from doing these restrictions. And they were looking for, asked me if I would be interested in participating in what they call an amicus brief or a friend of the court brief, which is different organizations. When a case is going up on appeal, there are groups that will author briefs on the legal issues that are being raised in the case as a way to help the court understand real world implications of what these legal positions have on folks and why we think it should be one way or the other on the decision. And I was like, oh, sure, no problem. Yeah, I'd love to do that. And they say, okay, great. We'll send you a questionnaire, fill it out, and get back to us. And we'll let you know what's going on. I had no idea who all was involved, other than a very well respected trans organization and a really top tier shelf law firm. And I was like, oh, great. Yeah, I'd love to help. And so literally one afternoon, I sat down and I answered this whole series of questions about about different things. And I was incredibly blown away when I saw the brief and who all was involved in it, and I mean, I think on that one, Jazz Jennings was involved, Chris Mosher, triathlete, Miss Major, who's a trans civil rights icon, who was one of the first people to stand up for us and was involved in the Stonewall riots. Jenny Finn Boylan, who's was a columnist for the New York Times, Lana Wachowski, the director. And I'm sitting here looking at all of these, and I think it was like 56 people on that one. We've actually done this brief now to a large number of the U.S. Circuit courts. So I've been on briefs on the Eighth Circuit, Sixth Circuit, Ninth Circuit, Seventh Circuit, and I was like looking at this and I'm like, there's a lot of really good writers. Why am I having like 4 paragraphs in this brief? But it was about our feelings about gender affirming care and what we saw as benefits of that care and how that care has affected our lives. And why it's important that trans people be allowed to have this care. And so we also submitted that the briefs get reworked for each district and whichever court it's appearing in, and the people have changed on some of them as far as who the folks are. But I've always been, I guess, a part of that core group that's in there. And then I think they added Nicole Maines to the group. I think Elliot Page was not necessarily one of the first ones, but he got on in relationship to that. And just seeing that information, being put in front of the Supreme Court on this issue, I think is incredibly important because it does tell the court that these are not just abstract things. This is something that affects people's core lives, and it does provide incredible benefits to folks. I've actually got to meet a number of the folks on there, and I was elected as a delegate to the Democratic National Convention last year, and we were trying to get Sarah McBride to come back to Nebraska this year for a potential fundraiser for our queer caucus that we have within the group. And so the chair of the caucus, and I'm the vice chair of the caucus, got down on the floor over and were able to get over to meet her. The chair introduced himself, and I said, "Oh, Senator McBride, I'm Jesse McGrath. So nice to meet you." She goes, "I know who you are." And I was like, "What?" And she was on that brief. And so just having so many incredible and mostly well-known trans folks as a part of that was truly amazing. And then I happened to be in Washington, D.C. At the time the Skrmetti argument was being made, because I'm a member of on the board of directors of the National Trans Bar Association, which is a group of lawyers, law students, an organization that does education and other things in the trans legal world. And for the last 4 years, we had been having small group ceremonies in front of the Supreme Court, admitting lawyers to be able to practice in the Supreme Court. And it's really kind of cool because the Chief Justice says, and a group from the National Transgender Bar Association, and it just so happened that our 2024 induction ceremony was scheduled for December 3rd. And we had known that for quite a while. And so I had been watching the Scrimeti case as it was the application for cert and then the granting of it, and then seeing our briefs get filed and other folks' briefs, and then waiting for the announcement on the date that it was going to be argued, and then finding it that it was December 4th, the day after our admission ceremony. So I just made sure that I had a hotel room for 2 nights, because one of the things about being licensed to practice in the Supreme Court is there's a separate line for admittance for attorneys who are practicing there. And so even the day before the Scarmetti argument, there was already a line of people to get in on the public side of things. And so being in the court, seeing my colleagues stand up and be sworn in to admit, and seeing, National Trans Bar Association again, in front of the Supreme Court and the justices. And then, so when I got over to the Supreme Court the next day, I got there at 4 a.m. To get in line for arguments that started at 10. And I was number 12 in line. We had no idea how many folks were going to be able to get in. Usually on any given day, you could probably get 100 lawyers in to hear an argument on a case. And because there was so much interest, and because there were so many parties that got seats within the court in relationship to this, then there were a lot of lawyers who had worked on it for the different organizations and such. Only 18 lawyers got in from the Supreme Court line, and I was so happy. The very first person in line was the National Trans Bar Association chair. There were ACLU lawyers, there were Lambda Legal lawyers. Pretty much the entire 18, I think, except maybe 2 or 3, were all queer-related supporters. And so it was just really great to be able to see that. And for whatever reason, every year that I've gone, I've managed to get seated basically in front of Amy Comey Barrett. So I've been watching her and seeing her reactions, and it's going to come down to how she decides on this. I have a feeling, and I can just only hope that those glances and smiles that we've exchanged over the last 3 years means something to her, in recognizing that we are humans and that we do deserve basic dignity, and you can't just say we don't exist because we make you uncomfortable. That is not a constitutional basis. That is not a in any way a legal justification for taking away our rights and creating us as second-class citizens in our own country. So hopefully something good comes out of those arguments. But being in there for that historic argument was such a moving experience, and there were more trans people in that courtroom than had ever been in the history of the Supreme Court. We had lawyers arguing the case. We had lawyers sitting in the audience. We had trans people as parties in the case. We had trans people as admitted in on the public. We had trans journalists covering it. So there were more trans people in that courtroom than any other time in history. And I can only hope that it has some effect in relationship to that. And it was kind of cool because after I got done, I was walking around outside, and I did run into Lily Wachowski, one of the folks who was on the brief with me, and I went up and introduced myself to her, and had a little fangirl thing going there for a little bit. But it was so incredible to see so many people there, so many people fighting for our rights. And it gives a little bit of hope that there is something positive that may come out of this, and that we may, get some rights. And going back and having listened to the argument again, the recording of it, looking at the transcript, I do have some hope that Amy Comey Barrett is going to see that there is a history of discrimination against us as a group, that there, and if nothing else, the actions that have taken place since Trump took office and his issuing executive orders, basically, you know, on his whim, taking us out of existence, and prohibiting us, and saying incredibly untrue and hurtful things, especially in the military ban one. As a veteran, I took incredible personal offense to him saying that trans people can't serve in the military because we're dishonest, we're liars, we're disloyal, we're un-American, we're unpatriotic, and basically saying that there was one statement that was, that trans people are responsible for all of the ills that are going on in the country. And it's like, that is just such incredibly bogus scapegoating,
Now it's time to take a next significant step in my life, and I need your help to do it. I struggle living in a male body, and I knew from the beginning of my transition that I need sex reassignment surgery, or bottom surgery in other words. Unfortunately, my transition is not covered by insurance or government help, and every single step has to be paid for out of my own pocket. I have no financial support from my family, so the community is the only place where I can ask for help. I had a consultation with gender clinic in Thailand and was approved for the procedure. It was a moment of true happiness, because I finally got a chance to feel whole and live a complete life. At the same time, I was filled with fear because of the financial burden and the risk of losing this opportunity. I have been waiting to take this step for a long time, and only with your help will I be able to do it. I chose the penile inversion technique as the most affordable and safe option. Waiting lists are ridiculously long, and I can't miss this chance. I have started a fundraiser to cover the costs related to this surgery. The price for the surgery, penile inversion with skin grafting, is $10,680. Medical tests and evaluations, $350. Accommodation for 24 days, $1,470. Flights to Bangkok, $2,250. Total amount needed, $14,750 US. I will cover all additional expenses during my stay in Thailand myself. I will also share my experience and details of preparing for this procedure, the actual surgery, and the recovery in my next videos. I will leave the link to the fundraiser for this surgery in the description under this video. You will also find the link to my Buy Me a Coffee page. I would be incredibly grateful for any help, whether through donations or sharing my fundraiser on your social media. Thank you for your support and help. It's very important and valuable to me. Thank you for being with me. See you soon in my next video. Bye.